The fluorescent hum of the IMCA locker room, showers dripping, no one there, was the soundtrack to my current existence. Each drop echoed in the cavernous, tiled space, a metronome for my mounting anxieties. I traced the condensation on the cool metal of the locker, my breath misting the surface. My reflection stared back, gaunt, hollow-eyed. This was it, the peak of my ambition. A shower stall that smelled perpetually of mildew and stale sweat. My landlord's eviction notice was a crisp white ghost in my pocket, a constant reminder of the precipice I clung to. Rent was due again. Bills, a relentless tide, threatened to drown me. Raj, the aspiring artist, was currently just Raj, the broke tenant. The irony wasn't lost on me, not that irony paid the bills. My canvases were stacked against the wall, pristine, untouched. Inspiration had fled, or perhaps it had simply packed its bags and left town, unable to afford the rent itself. Then the letter arrived. Thick, cream-colored paper embossed with a crest I didn't recognize. It spoke of a distant relative, a great-aunt twice removed, Elara Thorne. Elara Thorne. The name meant nothing. I had no family beyond my parents, who were long gone. The letter, penned by a solicitor with an absurdly long name that I'd already forgotten, informed me of my inheritance. Not just any inheritance, but the inheritance. A mansion, a sprawling estate miles from anywhere. The details were vague, almost dreamlike. It was described as a sanctuary of solitude and a testament to enduring legacy. Enduring legacy. I could barely endure my tiny studio apartment. The solicitor, a Mr. Abernathy, had been even more cryptic over the phone. His voice, dry as parchment, had crackled with an almost imperceptible amusement. He'd spoken of Elara's eccentricities, her reclusive nature, and a will that was unusual. A condition, Mr. Raj, he'd said, his tone carefully measured. A condition of residency. I must occupy the estate for a period of no less than 1 year. Should I fulfill this, the entirety of Elara Thorne's considerable fortune will be yours. Considerable fortune. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility, a stark contrast to the damp chill of the IMCA. It was too good to be true, of course. Everything was too good to be true when I was the one being offered it. But desperation was a potent persuader. The thought of canvases that didn't have to be sold before they were finished, of food that wasn't ramen, of a life not dictated by the gnawing fear of homelessness, was a siren song I couldn't ignore. The address was a string of numbers and a single, remote county. No towns nearby, just land. The solicitor had mentioned a caretaker, an old man named Silas, who would provide access. Silas. Another name, another unknown. It looked less like a sanctuary and more like a place that had long forgotten the sun. I stood up, the damp floor sticking to my bare feet. The rhythmic drip, drip, drip followed me as I walked towards the row of empty shower stalls. It was as if the entire IMCA had collectively held its breath, waiting for my decision. This mansion, this inheritance, it was a gamble. A colossal, terrifying gamble. But what did I have to lose? My current life was a slow, suffocating decay. I pulled on my worn jeans, the denim cool against my skin. The prospect of the mansion, with its implied isolation, its distance from everything familiar, should have sent a shiver of unease down my spine. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. A determined, almost reckless resolve. I would go. I would see what this enduring legacy held. What if Elara Thorne hadn't been a recluse? What if he had been driven into seclusion? The chill of the IMCA locker room, showers dripping, no one there, clung to me like a shroud. The promise of wealth, a distant relative I'd never met, a mansion. It felt like a dream spun from desperation and stale gym socks. I'd spent the last few days in a haze, packing the meager contents of my cramped apartment, the weight of it all pressing down. The lawyer, a man whose suit smelled faintly of mothballs and something medicinal, had been all business. He'd handed me the deed, the will, and a single tarnished key. The estate is yours, Mr. Raj, in its entirety, provided I reside there for 1 full year. 1 year. It sounded like an eternity, but the alternative, this endless cycle of ramen noodles and unfinished paintings, was a far more terrifying prospect. The drive was long, the scenery shifting from familiar urban sprawl to increasingly desolate countryside. The mansion, when I finally saw it, was a hulking silhouette against a bruised twilight sky. It was less a home and more a monument to decay, its stone facade weeping moss, its windows like vacant, staring eyes. A wrought iron gate, rusted and tangled with ivy, groaned a reluctant welcome as I pushed it open. The air here was different, heavy and still, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp rot and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. The key, cold and rough in my palm, turned with a protesting shriek in the massive oak door. The interior was vast, cavernous. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy panes. Cobwebs draped like macabre decorations from the high ceilings, and the silence was profound, broken only by the mournful creak of the house settling, or perhaps breathing. My footsteps echoed unnervingly on the marble floor of the grand foyer, each sound amplified, distorted. I chose a room on the second floor, one with a large bay window that overlooked the overgrown gardens. It was less cluttered with decaying furniture than the others, and the air felt marginally less stagnant. I unloaded my few possessions, the contrast between my worn duffel bag and the opulent, albeit ruined, surroundings stark. That first night, sleep was a restless, fragmented thing. I told myself it was just an old house, settling into its bones. It had been empty for decades after all. The next morning, the sun, a pale disk behind a persistent haze, offered little warmth. The library was filled with leather-bound books, their pages brittle and foxed, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and mildew. In the ballroom, a grand piano stood draped in a sheet, its keys like skeletal fingers. I ran a finger along its dusty surface, imagining the music that might have once filled this space. It was in the kitchen, a cavernous space with a massive cast-iron stove, that I first felt it, a distinct drop in temperature so sudden and localized it made me shiver. I looked around, expecting to see a draft, a broken window. Nothing, just the silent, imposing presence of the old appliances. Later, while trying to locate the main fuse box, I heard a faint melody, a child's lullaby drifting from somewhere upstairs. My heart gave a strange lurch. I was alone. Utterly, completely alone. I strained to hear it again, but the house offered only its usual symphony of groans and creaks. My mind, I reasoned, was playing tricks. The isolation, the sheer strangeness of it all was getting to me. That evening, as I sat in the dimly lit drawing room, sketching the skeletal branches of an ancient oak visible through the window, I heard it again. A soft, insistent scratching, not from the walls this time, but from the other side of the door. It was a deliberate sound, a rhythmic tap-tap-tapping, like fingernails on wood. I froze, my charcoal pencil hovering above the paper. It wasn't an animal, it sounded intelligent. I held my breath, listening. The scratching stopped. Silence descended, heavier than before. Then a low murmur, too indistinct to be words but undeniably a human sound, seemed to emanate from the very air around me. My hands trembled, smudging the charcoal. I told myself it was the wind, the old pipes, anything but what my instincts screamed it was. What was this house trying to tell me? The stale air of the Imca locker room, showers dripping, no one there, still clung to my skin hours later. It was a damp, vaguely chemical scent that had seeped into my clothes, into my very pores, a constant reminder of the temporary reprieve I'd snatched. My few belongings were piled haphazardly into a dented duffel bag, the worn canvas doing little to contain the jumble of my life. The will, that absurd, legally binding scrap of paper, had been the catalyst. A distant relative, a name I'd only just learned to spell, leaving me a fortune. A fortune tied to this crumbling edifice of a house, a place I'd only seen in grainy photographs. The lawyer, a man with an unnervingly smooth handshake and eyes that seemed to see right through me, had been vague. Old family estate, he'd said, his voice a low hum. Requires presence. Presence. I'd scoffed then. a nervous laugh that had echoed in the sterile office. Now the echo felt more ominous. I stood on the edge of town, the hulking silhouette of the mansion against the bruised twilight sky. It wasn't just old, it was ancient, a skeletal hand clawing at the heavens. The gravel drive crunched under my worn sneakers, each step a betrayal of my better judgment. The air grew colder the closer I got, a palpable chill that had nothing to do with the setting sun. It felt like stepping into a grave. The front door, a slab of dark, weathered wood, groaned open at my touch, revealing an interior swallowed by shadows. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that dared to penetrate the grime-streaked windows. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. My footsteps, unnaturally loud on the decaying floorboards, were swallowed by the vastness of the foyer. I dropped my bag with a thud that seemed to reverberate through the entire structure. This was it, my new life, my inheritance, my prison. I wandered through the downstairs rooms, each one more desolate than the last. A parlor choked with cobwebs, a dining room where the table was set with dust-covered plates, as if awaiting long-departed guests. In the library, the books were brittle, their pages crumbling at the slightest touch, their titles obscured by a fine layer of grit. I ran a finger along a spine, the paper disintegrating under my touch, leaving a powdery residue on my skin. But there was no wind inside. That night, sleep was a fleeting visitor. I kept seeing the faces carved into the banister, their eyes seeming to follow me in the dim light. I tried to focus on the wealth, on the lawyer's words, on the possibility of escape. But the house had a way of intruding, of weaving its way into my thoughts. I found myself thinking about my childhood, about the taunts, the whispered insults, the way the other kids would point, their laughter sharp and cruel. I'd always been the quiet one, the one who retreated, who built walls around himself. The house seemed to amplify those old insecurities, to give them form. I'd hear a creak, and it would sound like a derisive chuckle. In the morning, the sun offered little comfort. I tried to make a call, to reach out, to tell someone, anyone, about the unease that was slowly consuming me, but my phone had no signal, dead. I walked to the windows, hoping to see a passing car, a sign of life. Nothing. Just the dense, unyielding woods that pressed in on all sides, a green wall that seemed to grow thicker, more impenetrable with each passing hour. I found a small, tarnished mirror in a dusty dressing table. My reflection stared back, pale and drawn. But as I watched, something shifted. A faint, knowing smile touched my lips, a smile that wasn't mine. I recoiled, my breath catching in my throat. The smile vanished, leaving my face blank, a mask of fear. Was that me? Or was it something else, something that had been waiting patiently to claim what was left of me? The air in the IMCA locker room, showers dripping, no one there, tasted like stale chlorine and something else, something metallic and sharp. I'd come here to escape, a desperate, illogical impulse. I thought the mundane would anchor me. The chipped linoleum and the flickering fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the suffocating grandeur of Blackwood Manor. But even here, the house clung to me. I ran a hand over the rough concrete floor, the grit a familiar sensation. My own reflection stared back from the grimy mirror, gaunt, eyes too wide. It had been 3 days since I'd seen another human face, 3 days since the phone line had gone dead, 3 days since the gravel drive leading away from the manor had become impassable, swallowed by an unnaturally swift overgrowth. Raj, Ira being ridiculous, I told myself, my voice a hollow sound against the persistent drip, drip, drip of the shower heads. It's just a house. But it wasn't just a house. It was a presence. I felt it even now, a low hum beneath the surface of my thoughts, a subtle pressure behind my eyes. It was in the way the shadows seemed to deepen, even in the harsh light of the locker room, in the phantom scent of damp earth and decaying leaves that would occasionally waft through the stale air. Back at the manor, the silence was a tangible thing, thick and suffocating. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating rows upon rows of leather-bound books. Their titles were faded, their pages brittle, but the sheer volume was overwhelming. It felt like a repository of forgotten knowledge, of secrets carefully curated. My fingers traced the spine of a particularly heavy tome, its cover embossed with an unfamiliar crest. I'd found a hidden compartment behind a loose shelf yesterday, a small, velvet-lined recess. Inside lay a single object, a tarnished silver locket. It was intricately carved, depicting a weeping willow tree, its branches heavy with what looked like teardrops. I'd opened it, my heart racing, expecting. I didn't know what, but it was empty. The will, the promise of immense wealth. Was it a lure, a bait for something that fed on desperation? My initial excitement had curdled into a gnawing unease, a persistent itch under my skin. I pulled out my notebook, the pages filled with my frantic scrawls. The faint scratching sounds at night. The way objects would shift when my back was turned. I reread my own words, a knot tightening in my stomach. The grandfather clock in the hall, it chimes 13, always 13, and the portraits, their eyes follow me. It sounded like the ramblings of a madman, but it was my reality. The house seemed to sense my growing obsession. It offered glimpses, fragments of its history, like a predator toying with its prey. I'd found a hidden alcove in the west wing behind a tapestry depicting a hunting scene. Inside, a small wooden chest. It was locked, the keyhole rusted shut. I'd spent hours trying to pry it open, my fingernails raw, the wood splintering under my desperate attempts. Later, I found a key. It was on the mantelpiece in the drawing room, nestled amongst a collection of porcelain figurines that seemed to stare with vacant, painted eyes. The key was old, heavy, and strangely warm to the touch. It fit the lock of the chest perfectly. My hands trembled as I turned the key. The lid creaked open, revealing not jewels or gold, but a collection of faded photographs and a single leather-bound journal. The photographs were unsettling. They depicted the manor, but not as I saw it. In others, the trees surrounding the estate seemed to twist and writhe, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. There were people in the photos too, their faces indistinct, their postures unnatural, as if caught in moments of extreme distress. I picked up the journal. The paper was thin, almost translucent, and the ink had faded to a sepia tone. The handwriting was elegant yet frantic. It belonged to a woman. Her name, I now saw, was Elara. He was the previous owner, the one who had left me the house. It knows my fears. It shows me things I cannot unsee. I am trapped here. The walls breathe. I cannot escape its gaze. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, a mournful howl that seemed to echo Elara's despair. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath misting in the air. The photographs on the table seemed to shift, the figures within them subtly changing their positions, their faces turning towards me. Was I becoming like Elara? Was this house designed to break me, to feed on my sanity? The journal felt heavy in my hands, a testament to a shared torment. I was no longer just an investigator. I was a participant. What else lay hidden within these walls, waiting to be unearthed? And what would it cost me to find out? The air in the Imca locker room, showers dripping, no one there, was thick with the metallic tang of stale sweat and something else, something cloying and sweet like overripe fruit. I leaned against the cold, tiled wall, the damp seeping through my thin shirt. The water continued its relentless patter, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the oppressive silence. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place to escape the suffocating presence of the house, but it felt wrong. Every echo bounced back with a distorted familiarity like a warped memory. I needed the mundane, the ordinary hum of life. I'd imagined the chatter of other men, the scent of cheap soap, the reassuring normalcy. The rows of empty lockers seemed to stare, their metal doors like blank, unseeing eyes. My phone, predictably, had no signal. It had been like that for days. The landline, too, was dead. Raj, I told myself, I read being paranoid. It's an old house, a remote location. I'd seen it again last night, or felt it. A subtle shift in the wallpaper pattern in the grand hall, a momentary flicker in the periphery of my vision that resolved into nothing when I turned. They slithered into my thoughts, fragments of words I couldn't quite grasp, like a language just beyond my comprehension. A sudden, sharp rap echoed from the far end of the locker room. My head snapped up. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I stood frozen, straining my ears. The dripping continued, a maddening rhythm. Then another rap, closer this time. It sounded like knuckles on metal. "Hello," I called out, my voice raspy and thin, swallowed by the vastness of the room. No answer, only the relentless drip, drip, drip. I pushed myself off the wall, my legs feeling heavy, as if wading through water. Each step I took sent ripples of sound through the tiled expanse. I walked towards the source of the sound, my eyes scanning the rows of lockers. Nothing, just the dull sheen of metal. Then a low hum started, barely perceptible at first, like a distant engine. It grew, a resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The humming intensified, a deep thrum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. It was no longer just a sound, it was a presence. It felt like the house somehow had followed me here. My breath hitched. The air grew heavy, impossibly so, pressing down on my chest. The sweet, cloying scent returned, stronger now, choking. I could feel it, a vast, unseen entity observing me, its attention a tangible weight. It wasn't just the house. It was in the house, and it was aware of me. A locker door at the far end of the room creaked open, slowly, deliberately. I couldn't see anything inside, but I felt it. It was testing me. I backed away, my movements clumsy and desperate. My foot caught on something and I pitched forward, landing hard on the wet floor. The impact sent a jolt through me, but fear was a more potent anesthetic. The locker door continued to open, inch by agonizing inch. The humming reached a crescendo, a deafening roar in my ears that drowned out the dripping. It felt like the entire building was resonating with this unseen force. The humming ceased. The dripping stopped. Even the faint sounds from outside seemed to vanish. I could feel it, the vast, silent presence waiting. It knew I was alone. It knew I was trapped. The implication slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just about fear, it was about control. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it wanted something from me. Where had the water come from? The metallic tang of stale sweat and something cloying, sweet, like overripe fruit, clung to the air in the IMCA locker room, showers dripping, no one there. I pressed my back against the cold, tiled wall, the damp seeping through my thin shirt. The water continued its relentless patter, each drop echoing in the cavernous space. I thought coming here to a place so utterly ordinary would break it, the house, this thing that had taken root in my life. But the smell, that sickly sweet rot, it was here too. Faint, yes, but undeniably present. It was in the air, in the very grout between the tiles. My breath hitched. This wasn't possible. I'd driven for hours, the highway a blur of gray asphalt and indifferent trees. I'd stopped at this anonymous building, seeking refuge, a brief reprieve from the suffocating presence of the mansion. Now even here the tendrils of its influence reached. A chill that had nothing to do with the damp tile snaked up my spine. I pushed off the wall, my movements jerky. The locker room was empty, save for the ceaseless dripping. No one, just me and the echoing water. I needed to get back. I needed to confront it. I felt it in my bones, a terrible certainty. The house wasn't just a dwelling, it was a trap, and I was the bait. My car keys felt heavy in my pocket. The drive back would be long. The sun was already beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. Dusk was its favorite time. The time when the edges of reality blurred, when the house seemed to breathe. As I walked towards the exit, my footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the linoleum. A locker door creaked open, a slow, drawn-out groan that made me flinch. I spun around, my heart racing. Nothing. Just the empty locker, its metal door swinging gently. I told myself it was the draft, the old building settling. But the cloying sweetness, that scent of decay, seemed to intensify, wrapping around me like a shroud. I burst out of the IMCA and into the fading light. The air outside was cool, crisp, blessedly devoid of that suffocating perfume. I fumbled with my car door, my hands trembling. As I pulled away, I glanced back at the imposing brick building. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a flicker of movement behind one of them, a pale face pressed against the glass. Then it was gone. The drive back was a torment. The radio crackled with static, then a distorted voice, barely audible, seemed to speak my name. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, the jolt of pain a welcome distraction. "Get a grip, Raj," I muttered, my voice raspy. "It's just a house." But it wasn't. It was a living, breathing entity, and it knew me. It knew my fears. The notes had been a testament to that. The scribbled phrases, seemingly random at first, had begun to coalesce, forming a disturbing mosaic of my deepest insecurities. My fear of failure, my loneliness, the gnawing doubt that I was fundamentally unlovable. The house fed on it. It amplified it. I parked the car, the gravel crunching loudly under the tires. The front door stood ajar as if inviting me in. I stepped out, my legs feeling like lead. The wind rustled through the overgrown gardens, a mournful sigh. I could feel its gaze, the house's. It was waiting. I walked towards the entrance, the rotting scent growing stronger with every step. It was no longer just a smell. It was a physical presence, clinging to my clothes, filling my lungs. I hesitated at the threshold. I knew what awaited me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had to do this. I had to find a way to break free. I stepped inside. The cloying sweetness was overwhelming now, a suffocating miasma. I could hear it, a faint, rhythmic scraping from somewhere deep within the house, like fingernails on wood. My hand fumbled for the light switch, but my fingers met only rough, damp plaster. It wasn't there. It never was. I stood frozen, my senses on high alert. The scraping sound continued, growing closer. I could feel the vibrations through the floorboards. My breath came in ragged gasps. Not a voice, not really. More like a dry rustle of leaves laced with that terrible sweetness. "You can't leave, Raj," it breathed. "We're family now." My blood, thick and sluggish, seemed to freeze in my veins. I stumbled backward, my hands flailing, searching for an escape. What was making that sound? And why did it feel like it was coming from inside me? The scraping stopped. Silence, heavy and absolute, descended. I held my breath, straining to hear anything over the frantic thumping in my chest. My own heartbeat felt like a drumbeat in this tomb. Nothing. Just the faint, persistent drip, drip, drip of the showers somewhere in the distance. It was a sound I'd grown to associate with the house, this phantom water. Even when I was miles away, in the brief, desperate moments I'd managed to slip outside its suffocating embrace, I'd still hear it. A phantom echo. I forced my legs to move, inching backward, my eyes glued to the spot where the sound had originated. The air here was colder, thick with the cloying sweetness of decay, like overripe fruit left to rot in a forgotten cellar. My palms were slick with sweat, the rough plaster of the hallway wall a welcome, grounding sensation against my fingertips. This house. It played with me. It knew, it always knew, the will, that damn will. Immense wealth it had promised freedom, a new life. Instead, it had delivered this. This prison, this thing, it wasn't just walls and dust. It was a living, breathing entity feeding on my fear, weaving itself into the fabric of my mind. I needed to get out, not just out of this hallway, but out of this house. Permanently. The thought, once a distant flicker, now burned with a fierce, desperate urgency. I remembered the old maps, the ones I'd found tucked away in the study. They hinted at something beneath the house, a network of tunnels, a forgotten route system. If I could find a way in, maybe I could find a way out, or at least a way to understand what this place truly was. The grand staircase loomed ahead, its once ornate banister now splintered and warped, like skeletal fingers reaching out. But now it was my only path forward. I ascended slowly, each creaking tread a betrayal of my presence. The air grew lighter as I climbed, the cloying sweetness giving way to the stale scent of old paper and dried wood. The house seemed to hold its breath with me. I reached the landing, the vast, echoing expanse of the main floor stretching out before me. The study, that was where I'd found the maps. The door was ajar. I could see the faint glow of a dying ember in the hearth, a residual warmth from a fire I hadn't lit. As I approached, a faint melody drifted from within, a lullaby. It was the same one my mother used to sing, a tune I hadn't heard in years, not since. Not since before. My breath hitched. My mother. The house knew that too. It dredged up every buried ache, every forgotten grief, and twisted it into a weapon. I pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I'd left it, the scattered papers, the overturned inkwell, the single candle guttering on the desk. But the ember in the hearth was brighter now, pulsing with a soft, unnatural light, and the lullaby. It was louder. It seemed to emanate from the very walls, a mournful chorus of forgotten voices. Then I saw it. On the desk, amidst the chaos, lay a single pristine photograph. It was of me, younger, laughing, standing on a beach with my parents. It was a moment I cherished, a relic from a life that felt impossibly distant. But in the photograph, my mother's eyes were wrong. My father's smile was stretched too wide, a rictus of pure malice, and me. I looked terrified even in that frozen moment of joy. This wasn't just a house. It was a parasite feeding on memory, on love, on everything that made me human. I needed to find that tunnel. I needed to escape. My eyes scanned the room, searching for any clue, any hidden latch, any sign of an entrance. The maps, I had to find the maps again. They were here somewhere. My gaze fell upon the hearth. The pulsing ember seemed to beckon me. The heat radiating from it was intense, yet it didn't burn. It was a strange, suffocating warmth. And then my fingertips found it, a seam, a subtle indentation in the stone, almost invisible. With renewed determination, I pushed. The stone grated, a low, grinding sound that echoed the scraping I'd heard earlier. The air that rushed out was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. This was it. The entrance. A low growl, guttural and ancient. It was the sound of something awakened, something hungry. Was this my only chance, or the house's final trap? Nothing. Just the faint, persistent drip, drip, drip of the showers in the Imca locker room, showers dripping, no one there. It was enough to make me question my sanity. I was supposed to be in Blackwood Manor, not some forgotten, decaying locker room. But the cold, damp concrete beneath my bare feet, the cloying smell of mildew and stale sweat, the echoing emptiness, it was all too real. The will, the promise of wealth. It had all led me here to this place. This wasn't the grand inheritance I'd envisioned. It was a trap. I pushed myself up, my limbs stiff and aching. I remembered the last moments in the manor. My gaze swept across the rows of rusted lockers, their metal doors warped and buckled. Graffiti, faded and indecipherable, covered their surfaces like diseased skin. A single, shattered mirror on the wall reflected a distorted version of my own terrified face, eyes wide, jaw clenched. I looked like a cornered animal. I had to get out. I had to find a way back. Back to what I wasn't sure anymore. The manor had a way of blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. I stumbled towards the entrance, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. The heavy wooden door, scarred and splintered, felt impossibly resistant. I threw my shoulder against it, a primal surge of adrenaline coursing through me. It didn't budge. I tried again, harder this time, the impact jarring my bones, still nothing. It was as if the door had become one with the frame, an immovable barrier. Panic began to claw at my throat. I was trapped. A low hum started, a resonant vibration that seemed to seep from the very concrete. It wasn't a mechanical sound, but something deeper, more organic. It thrummed against my eardrums, a discordant symphony that frayed my nerves. The dripping from the showers intensified, each drop now sounding like a hammer blow. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound was inside me, a phantom echo of the manor's relentless, hungry presence. Then I saw it. Across the tiled floor, a faint, phosphorescent trail snaked its way from beneath one of the lockers towards the far wall. It pulsed with a sickly, pale green light, like bioluminescent algae blooming in stagnant water. It hadn't been there a moment ago. My stomach churned. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where? I forced myself to move, my bare feet sticking slightly to the damp tiles with each step. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and the air grew heavy, thick with an earthy, decaying smell that reminded me of freshly turned soil and something else. Something acrid, metallic. Hesitantly, I reached out and pulled at a loose tile. But from within, I could hear it. A soft, rhythmic slithering like 1,000 tiny scales dragging across rough stone, and the faint, sickly green light pulsed brighter from the opening. I knelt, peering into the gap. This was it, the heart of the house, the source of its corruption. I stood, my legs trembling, the wealth. It was a lure, a bait. The manor didn't offer riches, it offered itself. It wanted me, and this was its throat. I had to close it, sever the connection, whatever it was. I looked around desperately for anything, a tool, a weapon. My eyes landed on a discarded length of pipe, rusted and bent, lying near the base of a locker. It was heavy, solid. It would have to do. As I picked it up, the slithering stopped. The pale green light flickered and died. I gripped the pipe, its cold metal biting into my palm. The question was, would I survive it? And if I did, what would be left of me? Nothing. Just the faint, persistent drip, drip, drip of the Imca locker room, showers dripping, no one there. That's where I was. Not in the manor, not anymore. My fingers, slick with something I didn't want to think about, tightened around the cold, damp tile. The air here was thick with the cloying scent of mildew and stale chlorine, a stark contrast to the dry, dusty rot of Blackwood. It was a familiar smell, a smell of my childhood, of shared locker rooms and nervous adolescent energy. It was a smell of normalcy, or it had been. The memory of the final confrontation in the manor's ballroom was a raw wound. I remembered the feeling of my own skin crawling, of an invisible force trying to peel me open, layer by layer. It had shown me things I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten they existed. The shame of that failed presentation, the crushing disappointment of my father's unvoiced disapproval, the gnawing insecurity that had always clung to me like a second skin. Blackwood had amplified it all, twisted it, made it a weapon. I'd fought back, not with brute force, but with a desperate, clawing refusal to break. I'd focused on the mundane, the solid. The chipped paint on a door frame, the uneven grain of a floorboard, the persistent, maddening drip of water. And then, with a final, guttural shriek that seemed to echo from the very foundations of the earth, it had recoiled. It had spat me out. Now here I was. My body ached with a weariness that went beyond mere physical exhaustion. It was a soul-deep fatigue, the kind that settled in after a long, agonizing war. I pushed myself up, my limbs protesting with every movement. The fluorescent lights of the Imca locker room buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow. The empty shower stalls, their tiles gleaming with moisture, offered no comfort, just a sterile, echoing emptiness. I looked down at my hands. They were cleaner now, the grime and the other stuff scrubbed away. But the tremor was still there, a faint, persistent vibration that traveled up my arms. It was the echo of the house, a phantom touch. It was dormant, waiting, my will, the cryptic will that had lured me to Blackwood. It had promised wealth, a legacy. What it had delivered was something far more terrible, a physical manifestation of all the things we try to hide. I had escaped. I had survived. But at what cost? The weight in my chest was a constant, dull ache. I thought of the manor standing alone on its windswept hill. Had it crumbled when I left? Had its malevolent spirit dissipated, its power broken? I couldn't know. I wouldn't go back to find out. The wealth it had promised was meaningless now. A faint, metallic clang echoed from somewhere beyond the rows of lockers. My head snapped up. My heart lurched. Was it just the building settling, or was it something else? The dripping continued, a steady, maddening rhythm. I stood there listening, my breath catching in my throat. What was that sound?